It was one of those winter nights where the cold doesn't just touch your skin, it seeps into your bones, making a home there. The bus stop stood isolated under the dim yellow streetlight, a small island of artificial brightness in the darkness of the night. Alex hunched his shoulders, pulling his thin jacket tighter around his frame, though it did little to shield him from the biting wind. His breath formed small clouds in the air, visible evidence of life in the stillness of the night. The digital display at the bus stop blinked 9:45 p.m., and according to the schedule, the next bus wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes. 20 long, freezing minutes. Alex stomped his feet, trying to generate some warmth. He'd stayed late at the library studying for his upcoming exams, losing track of time until the librarian had politely but firmly informed him they were closing. Now he was paying the price, shivering alone at this deserted bus stop, miles from his apartment. He checked his phone, 10% battery and no messages. Not that he expected any. Since moving to this city for graduate school, his social circle had shrunk to practically nothing. Most nights, he returned to an empty apartment, microwaved dinner, and fell asleep to the sound of podcasts, voices of strangers keeping him company in the darkness. The wind picked up, sending a violent shiver through Alex's body. He cursed under his breath, wondering if he should just call a rideshare and sacrifice tomorrow's lunch money. As he was deliberating, footsteps approached from behind, crunching on the frost-covered sidewalk. Alex tensed slightly. Late-night encounters at empty bus stops weren't always friendly in his experience. Brutal night to be waiting for the 67, huh? A warm voice called out. Alex turned to see a man approaching, tall with broad shoulders, wearing a substantial winter coat that made Alex's jacket look like tissue paper in comparison. The stranger had a kind face, eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled, his cheeks and nose reddened from the cold. Something about his presence immediately put Alex at ease, which was unusual for someone who generally regarded strangers with caution. Yeah, 20 more minutes according to the schedule, Alex replied, his teeth chattering slightly. Though who knows if it'll actually be on time. The man laughed, a rich sound that somehow made the cold air seem less biting. I'm Jamie, by the way, regular on this nightmarish route. Alex, he responded, accepting Jamie's extended hand. His fingers were warm despite the cold, and Alex found himself reluctant to let go. I don't usually take this bus so late, but I lost track of time at the library. Jamie nodded understandingly. Student? Let me guess, midterms. Finals, actually. Master's program in environmental science. Impressive, Jamie said, and something in his tone made Alex believe he genuinely meant it. I work at the community center downtown. Just finished a late counseling session. The conversation flowed easily after that, punctuated by the occasional violent shiver from Alex. After one particularly strong tremor, Jamie frowned with concern. That jacket isn't doing you any favors, he observed. Here. Before Alex could protest, Jamie had unzipped his substantial coat and opened it like wings. Come on, I don't bite. Unless specifically requested, he added with a playful wink that sent warmth flooding to Alex's cheeks despite the cold. I couldn't possibly, Alex began, but another gust of wind cut through his thin jacket, making the decision for him. Hesitantly, he stepped closer, and Jamie wrapped one side of his coat around Alex's shoulders, pulling him against his side. The warmth was immediate and enveloping, not just from the coat, but from Jamie's body beside him. Better? Jamie asked, his voice closer now, breath warm against Alex's cold ear. Much, Alex admitted, trying to ignore how perfectly he seemed to fit against Jamie's side, how natural it felt to be sharing this small, intimate space with a complete stranger. The situation should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. Instead, it felt like finding shelter in an unexpected place. So, environmental science, Jamie said, not moving away. Saving the world one research paper at a time. Alex laughed softly. Trying to. My focus is on urban sustainability. How cities can adapt to climate change while reducing their carbon footprint. Not exactly the most exciting dinner conversation. Are you kidding? That sounds fascinating. Much better than hearing about my day counseling teenagers who'd rather be anywhere else. That actually sounds pretty meaningful, Alex countered. What made you go into counseling? Jamie was quiet for a moment, and Alex worried he'd overstepped. But then Jamie spoke, his voice softer. I had a rough time as a teen. Coming out in a small conservative town, Parents who didn't understand. There was this counselor at my school who, well, he probably saved my life, to be honest. I wanted to be that person for someone else. The vulnerability in Jamie's admission caught Alex off guard. This wasn't typical bus stop small talk. He found himself sharing in return. I get that. My parents weren't exactly throwing a parade when I came out either. It's part of why I moved here for grad school. Needed some distance. Jamie nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. Distance helps sometimes, but it can be lonely too. Yeah, Alex agreed, suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd had a conversation this genuine with anyone. It really can be. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sharing warmth in the cold night. The jacket wrapped around them both created a small private world, separate from the empty streets and the biting wind. Alex became increasingly aware of Jamie's heartbeat, steady and strong where their bodies pressed together. You know, Jamie said eventually, I take this bus 3 times a week, usually around this time. Never seen you before. Like I said, I don't usually stay at the library this late. But with finals coming up, well, I'm glad you did tonight, Jamie said simply, and Alex felt a flutter in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold. The conversation deepened as they waited. Jamie talked about his work at the community center, the challenges and rewards of helping young people navigate their identities. Alex shared his passion for creating sustainable urban environments, his dreams of designing green spaces that could transform city living. What struck Alex most was how attentively Jamie listened, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just making polite conversation. So what do you do when you're not saving the planet or freezing at bus stops? Jamie asked, a playful note in his voice. Alex laughed. Not much lately. School takes up most of my time. I used to paint, but... He trailed off, realizing it had been months since he'd touched his art supplies. But what? Jamie prompted gently. I don't know. It's hard to find the motivation sometimes. Or maybe the inspiration. Alex hadn't admitted this to anyone, how graduate school had slowly drained his creative energy, leaving little room for the things that once brought him joy. Jamie nodded thoughtfully. I get that. It's easy to lose parts of yourself when you're focused on one thing. What did you paint? Landscapes mostly. Urban scenes. I like capturing the way light plays on buildings, how nature finds ways to exist within concrete jungles. That sounds beautiful, Jamie said, and there was something in his voice that made Alex look up at him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, neither spoke. Jamie's eyes were a warm brown, flecked with gold in the streetlight, and they held Alex's gaze with an intensity that made his breath catch. The moment was broken by the distant rumble of an approaching bus. Both looked up, a mixture of relief and disappointment washing over Alex. Their time in this small, shared space was coming to an end. Is that our bus? Alex asked, reluctant to move from the warmth of Jamie's coat. Jamie checked the approaching vehicle and nodded. Looks like it. As the bus drew closer, Jamie made no move to unwrap his coat from around Alex's shoulders. Instead, he turned slightly, facing Alex more directly. I know this is probably forward of me, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that hadn't been there before. But I'd like to see you again. Maybe somewhere warmer than a bus stop. Alex felt his heart rate quicken. I'd like that too, he said, surprising himself with his certainty. The bus pulled up, its doors opening with a hydraulic hiss. Jamie reluctantly unwrapped his coat, letting Alex step away, immediately missing the warmth of their shared space. Your phone, Jamie said, holding out his hand. If you don't mind. Alex handed over his phone, watching as Jamie quickly entered his number. Text me, he said, returning the phone with a smile that warmed Alex more than any coat could. Maybe we can get coffee after one of your library sessions. They boarded the bus together, finding seats near the back. Though they were no longer sharing a coat, they sat close enough that their shoulders touched, continuing their conversation as the bus wound through the nighttime streets. Alex couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so comfortable with someone so quickly, as if they'd known each other for years rather than less than an hour. When Alex's stop approached, he felt a strange reluctance to leave. This is me, he said, standing up. Jamie looked up at him with that warm smile. Don't forget to text me. I mean it. I won't, Alex promised, and he knew he meant it. As he stepped off the bus into the cold night air, he turned to see Jamie watching him through the window, raising a hand in farewell as the bus pulled away. That night, in his small apartment, Alex sent a simple message. "Thanks for keeping me warm tonight. Coffee sounds great." He fell asleep with a smile on his face for the first time in months. The next few days passed in a blur of texts and phone calls. What started as casual messages about their days evolved into deeper conversations that stretched late into the night. Alex learned that Jamie had a younger sister he adored, that he could cook exactly one dish well, spaghetti carbonara, and that he had a habit of rescuing houseplants from clearance sections and nursing them back to health. In turn, Alex shared stories about his childhood in rural Michigan, his collection of vintage cameras, and his secret dream of designing sustainable tiny houses. Their first official date was at a small coffee shop halfway between the library and the community center. Alex arrived early, nervously rearranging the sugar packets on the table until Jamie walked in, bringing with him that same warmth he'd radiated at the bus stop. He was even more handsome in daylight, his dark hair slightly tousled, wearing a deep blue sweater that brought out the warmth in his eyes. "You found the place," Jamie said, sliding into the seat across from Alex. "It wasn't hard. I've actually been here before, just never noticed it was so." Alex gestured around at the cozy interior, the local art on the walls, the mismatched vintage furniture. "Charming," Jamie suggested. "I was going to say not corporate, but charming works too." They talked for hours, long after their coffee had gone cold. Alex found himself sharing things he rarely discussed with anyone. His fears about the future, his complicated relationship with his parents, the loneliness he'd felt since moving to the city. Jamie listened with that same attentiveness he'd shown at the bus stop, occasionally reaching across the table to touch Alex's hand when the conversation turned particularly vulnerable. "You know," Jamie said as they finally prepared to leave, "I've been taking that same bus at that same time for over a year. It's strange to think we might never have met if you hadn't stayed late at the library that particular night. Or if you hadn't offered to share your coat with a freezing stranger," Alex added. Jamie smiled. "Best decision I've made in a long time." As they stood outside the coffee shop, neither seemed eager to part ways. "I live just a few blocks from here," Jamie said hesitantly. "Would you like to come over? I could make dinner. By which I mean the one dish I know how to make well." "The famous carbonara?" Alex asked with a smile. "I'd love to." Jamie's apartment was exactly what Alex had imagined. Warm, slightly cluttered, with bookshelves lining one wall and healthy plants occupying every available surface. The kitchen was small but functional, and Alex leaned against the counter, watching as Jamie moved confidently around the space, preparing ingredients. "Can I help?" Alex offered. "You can open that bottle of wine," Jamie suggested, nodding toward a bottle on the counter. "And maybe tell me more about these tiny houses you want to design." As they cooked together, Jamie insisting that Alex could at least handle grating the cheese, the ease between them continued to grow. Their hands brushed occasionally, sending small thrills through Alex's body. The domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on him. How natural it felt to be in this kitchen with Jamie, sharing space and conversation as if they'd done it 100 times before. Over dinner, which was indeed excellent, they talked about their hopes for the future. Jamie spoke about his dream of opening his own counseling practice someday, focusing specifically on LGBTQ+ youth. Alex shared his vision for sustainable urban planning that prioritized green spaces and community areas. "You know what I think?" Jamie said, refilling their wine glasses. "I think you should start painting again." Alex looked up, surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because your eyes light up when you talk about it. The same way they do when you talk about environmental design. I think maybe they're connected for you. The art and the science of creating spaces." The observation was so insightful, so perfectly aligned with feelings Alex hadn't fully articulated even to himself, that he felt momentarily speechless. "I never thought about it that way," he admitted. "But you might be right." After dinner, they moved to Jamie's small living room, sitting close together on the couch. The conversation flowed as easily as it had from the beginning, but there was a new tension in the air, an awareness of their proximity, of the growing attraction between them. "Can I ask you something?" Jamie said, his voice softer now. "That night at the bus stop, when I offered to share my coat, did you have any idea what you were getting into?" Alex smiled, shaking his head. "Not a clue. I just knew I was cold, and you were warm. And now I think it was the best kind of cold night," Alex said honestly. "The kind that leads you somewhere unexpected." Jamie's hand found his, fingers intertwining. I'm really glad you got cold that night, Alex. I'm really glad you had a warm coat, Jamie. The kiss, when it finally happened, felt like coming home. Jamie's lips were soft and certain against his, one hand gently cupping Alex's face. It was a perfect first kiss, tender but with an undercurrent of passion that promised more. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. I've been wanting to do that since the bus stop, Jamie admitted. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to know you first. Really know you. As winter turned to spring, their relationship deepened. They fell into comfortable routines, study dates at the library, dinner at Jamie's apartment, weekend explorations of the city. Alex started painting again, setting up a small easel by the window in his apartment. His first new painting was of a bus stop at night, a single streetlight illuminating two figures sharing a coat. There were challenges, of course. Alex's finals week left little time for anything else, and Jamie's work sometimes required late nights and emotional labor that left him drained. They navigated these periods with patience and understanding, learning each other's needs and boundaries. The first time Alex brought Jamie home to meet his parents was tense. His father was polite but distant, his mother trying too hard to compensate. But watching Jamie charm his skeptical family, answering their probing questions with grace and humor, Alex felt a surge of pride and affection. That night, in his childhood bedroom, Jamie held him close and whispered, "They'll come around. And if they don't, we'll make our own family." 6 months after that fateful night at the bus stop, they found themselves there again. It was a mild spring evening, nothing like the bitter cold that had first brought them together. They were waiting for the bus to take them to a concert downtown, standing in almost the exact spot where they'd first met. "It looks different in the spring," Alex observed, looking around at the now familiar bus stop. Jamie nodded, slipping an arm around Alex's waist. "Less desperate and freezing, more quaint and romantic." Alex laughed, leaning into Jamie's embrace. "I don't know if a bus stop can ever be romantic." "This one is," Jamie insisted. "This is where I met you. Where everything changed." As they stood there waiting, Jamie suddenly grew serious. "Alex, I've been thinking." "Dangerous," Alex teased, but he could sense something important coming. "My lease is up next month," Jamie continued. "And I know we've only been together for 6 months, but I've never been more certain about anything in my life. Move in with me, or I'll move in with you, or we can find a new place together. I just know I want to come home to you every day." Alex felt his heart swell. The prospect of waking up next to Jamie every morning, of building a life together, filled him with a joy he couldn't articulate. "Yes," he said simply. "Absolutely yes." Jamie's face broke into that warm smile that had first melted Alex's defenses on a cold winter night. Yeah, but fair warning, I come with a lot of plants and art supplies. And I come with even more plants and a very specific way of organizing the spice rack." "I think we'll manage," Alex said, leaning in for a kiss just as their bus approached. As they boarded, Alex looked back at the unassuming bus stop that had changed the course of his life. A simple metal bench under a streetlight, unremarkable to anyone passing by. But to Alex, it would always be the place where, on the coldest night of the year, he'd found unexpected warmth in a stranger's coat, and in doing so, found his way home. 1 year to the day after they met, Jamie took Alex back to that same bus stop. It was snowing lightly, the flakes catching in Alex's hair as Jamie dropped to one knee on the sidewalk, pulling out a small box from his coat pocket. The same coat he'd wrapped around Alex that first night. The proposal was simple and perfect, just like their beginning had been. And as Alex said yes, pulling Jamie to his feet and into his arms, he marveled at how the coldest night of his life had led to the warmest love he'd ever known. Total _char_count, 18,562.